Welcome to the Have More Fun podcast. In this episode, I talk with Rafa Robert about love, money, and dragons.
People feel like controlled and judged and shamed by our closest ally because we just don't do what Shanti Feldman calls, give the benefit of the doubt. The husband who's telling the wife, like, why did you buy, this, another pair of shoes, may also be the husband who spends $1,000+ on a golf weekend or something like that. It's like, well, gosh, you're not mad about that spending, but that's because it's valuable to you. Right? Like, so think about that. Like, probably where they're ending up is somewhere, either one of them won or they're somewhere in the middle. and we don't really talk about that.
One of my favorite stories to read my girls when they were little was The Paper Bag Princess by Robert Munsch. It's a fast read that has a lot of great lessons in it for not only little girls, but grown adults as well. And so I decided that today, to start our podcast, we are going to have a reading time. Because sometimes, as an adult human being, we just need to hear a story about a princess, a dragon, and a guy named Ronald to help us remember who we are and what really matters. The Paper Bag Princess by Robert Munsch. Elizabeth was a beautiful princess. She lived in a castle and had expensive princess clothes. She was going to marry a prince named Ronald. Unfortunately, a dragon smashed her castle, burned all her clothes with his fiery breath, and carried off Prince Ronald. Elizabeth decided to chase the dragon and get Ronald back. She looked everywhere for something to wear, but the only thing she could find that was not burned was a paper bag. So she put on the paper bag and followed the dragon. He was easy to follow because he left a trail of burnt forests and horses' bones. Finally, Elizabeth came to a cave with a large door that had a huge knocker on it. She took hold of the knocker and banged on the door. The dragon stuck his nose out of the door and said, "Well, a princess. I love to eat princesses, but I have already eaten a whole castle today. I'm a very busy dragon. Come back tomorrow." He slammed the door so fast that Elizabeth almost got her nose caught. Elizabeth grabbed the knocker and banged on the door again. The dragon stuck his nose out of the door and said, "Go away. I love to eat princesses, but I have already eaten a whole castle today. I'm a very busy dragon. Come back tomorrow." "Wait," shouted Elizabeth. "Is it true that you are the smartest and fiercest dragon in the whole world?" "Yes," said the dragon. "Is it true," said Elizabeth, "that you can burn up 10 forests with your fiery breath?" "Oh, yes," said the dragon, and he took a huge deep breath and breathed out so much fire that he burnt up 50 forests. "Fantastic," said Elizabeth, and the dragon took another huge breath and breathed out so much fire that he burnt up 100 forests. "Magnificent," said Elizabeth, and the dragon took another huge breath, but this time nothing came out. The dragon didn't even have enough fire left to cook a meatball. Elizabeth said, "Dragon, is it true that you can fly around the world in just 10 seconds?" "Why, yes," said the dragon, and jumped up and flew all the way around the world in just 10 seconds. He was very tired when he got back, but Elizabeth shouted, "Fantastic! Do it again!" So the dragon jumped up and flew around the whole world in just 20 seconds, and when he got back, he was too tired to talk, and he lay down and went straight to sleep. Elizabeth whispered very softly, "Hey, dragon," but as loud as she could. "Hey, dragon!" The dragon was so tired, he didn't even move. Elizabeth walked right over the dragon and opened the door to the cave. There was Prince Ronald. He looked at her and said, "Elizabeth, you are a mess. You smell like ashes, your hair is all tangled, and you are wearing a dirty old paper bag. Come back when you are dressed like a real princess." "Ronald," said Elizabeth, "your clothes are really pretty, and your hair is very neat. You look like a real prince, but you are a bum." They didn't get married after all. There are a lot of things I appreciate about this story. I like that Elizabeth knew her worth and that she used her brains to outsmart the dragon. I also love that she recognized what really matters in the big scheme of life. She was smart enough to address the things in her life that weren't going to serve her well long term and took proactive steps to make brave choices, like getting rid of Ronald. Sometimes it takes courage to face the dragons in our life, but if we are willing to get scrappy and also get honest with the people in our lives, then we can experience a fresh start that will cause us to thrive like never before. We can also find confidence we didn't know we had and come up with solutions that impress even ourselves, which is also why I am excited about the topic of the podcast today. Often, one of the big topics that can feel like a dragon in our life that we can't quite figure out how to tame is getting our finances in order. And if this topic feels stressful to you, you are not alone. And my guest today has some ideas for all of us. Rafa Robert is the director of Love and Money at Thrivent, and I'm a huge fan of Love and Money because they are helping couples and families feel more confident about the financial decisions they face on a daily basis. And if you've ever felt out of control with your finances or want tools to communicate better with your partner, or maybe you're looking for practical tips on how to set your family up for success long term, then Love and Money has the tools you are looking for. You are going to love Rafa. He is full of energy, super funny, so relatable. It makes talking about money no big deal. Rafa has a master's in counseling psychology and is the co-host of the Love and Money podcast on the Relevant Network. He's been married for 20 years and is the proud dad of 2 awesome kids. So without further ado, here's my friend, Rafa Robert. All right, so to start, can we please talk about Amazon Prime? Because I have a 2-day self-imposed cooling off period for non-essential purchases. And so here's what I do. I put them in my cart, but I don't buy them immediately. I give myself 2 days, clearly, because my financial sensibilities swing wildly between I need to save money and you only live once, right? So I'm curious, what is your best tip for managing the small purchasing decisions that we make on a daily basis? Because I don't know how you feel about this, that it's the small decisions that have a big impact on our long-term financial health. What do you think?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, a lot there. I'll start with the small stuff, the cooling period. That's fantastic. I love that. And I think everyone should try that. And it's interesting because there's some good science there. Daniel Kahneman, who's a kind of a Nobel Prize winning psychologist and social scientist, has this fast brain, slow brain thing that he talks about. And our fast brain is the stuff that activates really quickly. And it tends to also be the more emotional and irrational. And the slow brain, which is where we do more of our logical processing, is, as he says, lazy. And so the idea of helping yourself manage the small stuff by creating a little bit of a cooling period is actually brilliant. And it's a great strategy. And Amazon does make it so easy to one-touch purchase, which makes that hard. The thing with the small stuff is it's a kind of a yes and, like, so technically I'm going to actually tell you that it's the small stuff is not as impactful if you don't get a few of the big things right. So in a lot of the work that we've done, not surprisingly, where you're right, is like it's living within your means that matters most. And so if you can figure out how to spend with what you've got and with what God's gifted you, then actually that's kind of the secret sauce. That's the name of the game. And so what happens is, what we've learned is there's a couple of big stuff. Like if you buy a house and car that's too big, and we tend to advise people, like, keep your housing and your car transportation to 28% or less of your gross income. Because when you start to cross over, specifically when you start to cross over and that stuff is more than 40% of your income, it starts to get really, really hard to live within your means. So what that means is it doesn't matter how many small things you eliminate. It's going to be really, really hard to catch up. But on the flip side of that, where you're right, is if you've made a couple of the big decisions, like if you got into a house that was the right size, if you didn't overbuy on a car, then you've got a lot more margin or breathing room to work with. And then you can give yourself a little grace. You can actually do a few more of those Amazon purchases or a few more of those, the classic, give up coffee. Like you don't have to give up as much coffee as you want. So get some of the big stuff right, and you actually don't have to be as perfect with the small stuff. But I think the one tip that I would say for small things is have a plan. I'm just amazed at how many people don't have, like, you have a plan obviously for Amazon, but I mean like a plan for like how much of your spending can you actually use for like shopping, for Amazon. And if you know that going into advance, then what you're doing is you're giving yourself the freedom to say, like, look, I can have this much coffee or this much lunch a week. I know that if I do that, I'm living within a good plan, and then you can do it guilt free and without all that shame and stuff that we feel. So that's what I'd say.
I love it. And that percentage, okay, so 28% for house and car. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's the ideal. So the limit is like from 28% to 40. Don't cross over in a perfect world, 28% and under for your housing and your car. So add up your house rent or car or whatever your transportation payments and divide it into your gross pay. If that number is 28% or less, you've got a lot more breathing room and wiggle room every month. If it's over 40, it just gets really hard. Like by the time you pay your bills and your needs, like you're going to feel that strain and that stress. So that's the big one. And then just get a plan where, like, look, this is how much I spend on, once all my needs are paid and my giving, here's how much I've got for the fun stuff and the shopping, and then do that guilt-free. Don't sweat it.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk about another area that can be a little bit stressful. And you talk about having a plan. Do you have any suggestions for couples who have different spending styles?
Yeah, this is a huge topic for us, and I'm really passionate about this. Because we get a lot of people that are like, I'm the saver, he's the spender, or vice versa, and that and this is a big stress point, and we know this is a tough topic for couples at all stages. And the great news I think about this is that I think just God obviously designed us to have our differences help us out, right? Like to have people complement each other. And inherently in that spender saver dynamic, the funny thing is that people, that we can really balance each other out. Spenders can help savers not be in a scarcity mindset. And the savers obviously can help spenders not lose their shirt and not be in debt all the time. And so the reality is like, by God's design, like we can kind of counterbalance each other in that. And so the reality is, to get to your question, is like, everybody spends and saves. And so the difference that we like to tell people is like, we have different values or priorities for what we should spend and save on. So it's not really like we all want to spend and save. The classic thing I say is like, the husband who's telling the wife, like, why did you buy, this, another pair of shoes, may also be the husband who spends $1,000+ on a golf weekend or something like that. It's like, well, gosh, you're not mad about that spending, but that's because it's valuable to you. So for me, the practical advice for couples making those decisions are two things. One, talk about it. You have to. It's awkward. It's hard. You'll get over the awkwardness. You'll get over the hard. I promise you'll get over the hump. Because building appreciation for one another, like, what do you value? What do I value? What are your priorities? What are my priorities? Allows us to not only like have empathy and really appreciation, but it also allows us to align, because all of a sudden we start seeing like, oh, you and I want very similar things. Like we both want what's best for the kids. We just have different ideas on what that means. You think like buying whatever they want, and I think saving up for their college. Like, oh, let's align on what we want so that we can take action. So that communication is key. And then the other really, really practical thing is like, again, go back to your plan, figure out the different buckets. And then one great idea is decide, number one, what's an amount that you all can spend, again, guilt-free and without discussing. So say, hey, anything under, I'm making this up, anything under $100, we don't have to worry too much about, but over $100, we will always come together and talk, or $50 or whatever that limit is for you personally. And consider having a little bit of a fun fund for each of you to be able to maybe put in there and say, hey, $50 a month goes into this account, and we can each spend that however we want. In however way we want. I'm a saver. I want to spend it up for 5-6 months and buy something big. Great. You like to go do more Amazon purchases and, eat it up every month. Great. Like everybody gets a little bit of freedom to do that. And so now we align, we communicate, but we also have some practical plans on how to carry it out.
Okay. That is super helpful. I do have a question about joint accounts. So when Joe and I got married, my husband Joe, we had nothing, right? So joining our assets meant we had a futon and a couple boxes of Kraft mac and cheese, right? So It was like not a big deal.
Was it the blue box? The blue box, the mac and cheese, the good stuff, or the Velveeta, or what?
Oh, it was probably like the generic brand.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right.
For sure. I know that there's a lot of couples who joining assets can be a delicate conversation. And
Mm.
so, do you have any research on whether it's better to have joint accounts when you get married or if it's better to keep accounts separate?
Yes, you're hitting all my passion points. Yes, yes, we do. So I'll give credit to our a couple places. So our friend and a partner, Dr. Sonia Britt Luter, who teaches and does research out of Kansas State. She shared some research on our podcast the other day about this, where the couples who have joint accounts and do the finances together report higher satisfaction than those that don't, like without assigning like sort of causality, like which is the chicken or the egg. What we know is that couples who are doing joint accounts are by and large, according to the research, more satisfied. In addition to this, our another part of our Thrivent organization is Prepare and Rich, and they've been doing relationship research for 50 plus years. A lot of people have probably done their premarital counseling stuff, and their research also shows couples who co-manage, who basically are working through money stuff together, are much more satisfied than those where, for example, one person is doing it all. In fact, where it might even feel like one person's controlling it all. And so the reality is the research does show this. And I think, biblically, like obviously, like God created us for oneness. This is a huge part of one of the things we're doing in our new course for couples, Love and Money courses, helping people to realize like you need to be one team, and then just think through the like, okay, practically what does that mean? Like, we're going to bring our money together. It's not going to be my money and your money, it's God's money and our money. And so yeah, let's figure this out together. And I don't know about you, but like I think a lot of the conversation I'm hearing today with this question is one of two reasons. I'm interested in what you think. One is because people are really feeling like that whole my money, your money. It's like, look, I've got all this debt, student loan, or I've got all this stuff, and I've got to figure it out because I don't want to saddle you with it. Or the flip of like, I don't want your mess. Or we're just afraid, like, isn't it easier if we just do this separate? Like, then we don't have to talk and fight about it and feel bad about it. Like, wouldn't that be easier to just avoid it? And I think I get it. I get why people are saying that, but it's just, from our view, at least, it's not the best way. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I totally see that, especially with the debt issue. Are you seeing record levels of people who are just feeling completely burdened by debt?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think this whole, we've got a generation coming out with student debt. That's why our partners in Thrive in Student Resources are, their vision is for people to get through college debt free or with as little debt as possible, which is
Wow.
countercultural if you think about it. Like, we do student loans and we do student loan refinancing, but what we really want is for you not to have one at all. And that's the cool part about it, being a Christian member, not for profit, is we can do that, is say, like, look, how do you avoid one at all? And it's because this thing's an epidemic. But then, yeah, I mean, the average amounts of people, couples running credit card debt, how little we have saved up for emergencies. I mean, there's a reason why this topic is so tricky. And yeah, and it's forcing us to then culturally do things like what we're talking about and say, like, well, what are the band-aids we can do? Like, let's keep our stuff separate. Like, let's protect ourselves from one another's debt. And that's just problematic for a relationship if you think about it.
Totally. Is there a conversation, and we've talked about a lot of conversations that couples need to have, but is there one important conversation related to money that you just feel like couples are not having or are afraid to have?
Mm. Yeah, you know what? The one I mentioned a little bit ago where I said, the first thing to do is literally like,
The
yeah, like,
priority.
what do you value and prioritize? And I would add why. Like, we just don't you think we just don't listen to each other? I love James 1:19, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. It's like we just culturally, like, we don't listen very well. And I just think the idea of saying, like, my wife's Kelly is like, Kelly, what do you value and what do you prioritize? Like, it's this unselfish lens. And then, like, why? Because I think we pass judgment, right? Like, I might be like, why do you prioritize the home so much? Like, things for the house, like, that's just not important to me. And then you realize, like, oh, like, bringing peace and having it be a place that welcomes others, and having the teenagers in our lives be able to come to our house and feel, a sense of peace and shalom, like, is really important to her. Like, oh, I get why you want to spend money on that. Like, that's just a mind changer. And I just think we're afraid to have it because it uncovers some, messy stuff, and it feels like it could get tense, but I think it's the most important conversation we're not having.
Oh, I totally agree. And how transformative it can be, not only in the area of money in your life, but in so
Yeah.
many other areas too, right? Parenting or your career.
Yes.
It just
Yeah.
transcends all those different aspects.
I mean, think about that, right? Think about from parenting. I know that's a huge deal for this audience, which we love. Is like, how many people are completely on the same team for what they want for their kids, but they don't act like it because the how to get there might feel a little different. It's like if we could align and clasp hands as a team, like, and be united and say like, hey, sometimes we disagree on the how, but we're totally united on the what and the why. It's like, I just think the conversations would be more gentle and kind and generous
Yes,
and you know what I mean? Like, I
totally.
just think we'd support each other, and that's the thing with money, right? Like, people feel like controlled and judged and shamed by our closest ally, because we just don't do what Shanti Feldman calls, give the benefit of the doubt,
Hmm.
and that generous narrative around money, because we don't get it. We don't get one another's perspective or backgrounds and experiences. That's a big thing for us, right?
So I think you brought up a really good point about parenting and getting on the same page. And I'm curious because so often the messages that we pick up about money stay with us for a lifetime. And
Mm,
so I'm curious how, as parents, our beliefs about money impact what we teach our kids
mm,
about money and
mm.
how we can set them up well for success later on.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And I think, I guess to start, like that old cliche, I can't take credit for it, but that more is caught than taught,
Mm.
is so true around money. Like, I would lead off by saying, whatever we think we're saying, whether we think it's right or wrong, our kids are watching. They're watching what we're doing. And so, like, if you talk about generosity and giving, but then you clench up whenever you're doing it, like, your kids notice that. If you talk about, just living with an abundance mindset and like, all we have is a gift from God, let's be grateful. And every time the bill comes, you become a sourpuss curmudgeon. Like, your kids feel that and they pick that up, and we're passing those true lessons and those truths to them. So, what I love the way you phrase this about beliefs, because for us, as you know, one of the big things is that we think this relationship we have with money is much more than just practical. It's not just dollars and cents and budgets, and it's really at the core, it's what we believe about money and our cultural experiences and past historical experiences in our families with money are driving the thoughts and the emotions that ultimately lead to the behaviors and habits that result in the practical outcomes. And so it's really this belief that's at the center of everything that we feel and do around money. It's the kind of classic cognitive behavioral psychology. And so it starts with beliefs. And I think, number one, ourselves believing, but teaching our kids things like, everything we have is God's. And so because it's a gift, like, treat it like a gift and be grateful and generous with it and serve others with it. And then the belief that it's not going to be more that makes us happy, but maybe it's not more, it's most. Can we make the most with what God's given us? And how do we make space for the things that matter most? And then just the belief that, like, if you believe in the principles, good financial principles on giving and saving and then spending within your means, then you know what, then do teach and model to your kids giving and saving and living early on. Spend, save, share buckets or envelopes, helping them say, hey, look, everything you earn, whether it's allowance or babysitting money or whatever, like, we're gonna set aside 10% to share, however, and give them the power however you want to. You're going to set aside 20% of that money, even if it's $5, $10. 20% of that is going into a bucket that you save for something that you want later, and let's have fun with that and dream about what are you saving for. And then whatever's left you can spend, but only if you have it in that little bucket or in that account. And if we teach our kids as early as 5, to start doing that, like, what a gift we're giving them. And then we can share those beliefs in ways that they can carry out practically.
That's such a tangible, easy thing to do with our kids, and it will set them up well
Mm-hmm.
for a lifetime. So I love that.
Yeah, and if people, by the way, like, we've got great articles on that. We've got these new kids book series, by the way. The site raisegenerouskids.com has some books that we did, to really, like, and family challenges for them to really be able to talk to the kids and share stories at different ages around these principles. So if you're really looking to kind of make that a part of their lives, maybe check those things out, because to your point, like, they're really actionable and they make a huge difference.
Okay, and that's raisegenerouskids.com.
Yeah, that's the publisher of these kids books, and they're really all about generosity and kids at a few different kids ages that will apply to your audience for sure.
Brilliant. So I was sitting down with a couple last week, and they were telling me how early in their marriage, they decided that they were going to live off 80% of their salary and give 20% away. And then over the years, they've been able to flip-flop that ratio, where now they live off 20% and give away 80%, which is incredibly inspiring.
Wow. Right? Yes.
But there's so many people in our culture, and there's this underlying narrative that believes that the more we give away, the less we have. And this couple that I was talking to really challenged that paradigm for me. And so I'm curious how you see generosity impact the financial health of families.
Yeah. Well, and obviously it's a big deal. We're part of this thriving family. People often see our t-shirts "Live Generously" all over the country because, the type of organization we are. Ultimately, our mission statement is about helping Christians be confident, content, and generous. Because we believe that a wise with money journey leads to generosity, and that's God's calling for our lives. So this is a sweet spot for us. And yes, we have plenty of research, and actually there's tons of research about the correlation between generosity and financial health. I love that you use financial health, because too many people are looking at, I think, what you just laid out from the lens of financial wealth. And it's not about wealth, it's about well-being and health. And so you nailed it. It's like, health for us, we measure by whether a person can answer the question that says, I feel like we have more than enough for myself and my family. And what's interesting about the research on that is that we find that when you use that as so like, regardless of what's in your life, can you feel like, and like literally look at your situation and say, we have more than enough for ourselves, right? What happens is that there's a strong correlation between that and generosity. Obviously, people feeling like we have enough. And what's crazy is it's not about income. It's not about wealth. So a person, a household of, like, say, 70,000 household income that is living within their means. So what the couple you just described, like making an intentional decision to say, like, this is the money we have, this is what we do with it, is 30 times more likely to report that feeling that we have more than enough than families that make $200,000 who spend more than they earn.
Wow.
So the science, right, of the correlation between generosity and that feeling of contentment and enoughness is what matters. And to your point, we feel like, oh, well, if I only had a little bit more, then I'd be fine to give. And like the couple that you just mentioned, it's like, actually, no, we figure out how to live on what we've got. We drive that generosity, and guess what? We live into that lifestyle the way God designed it, and we continue to flourish. And we literally feel like we have more than enough, no matter how much money we have. And there's a lot of studies talking about, the correlation between generosity and health and well-being and stress levels. Generosity, there's a great book, Happy Money, a cool little book out there that has tons of research in it. And again, like from a non-Christian lens, even saying like, people who are generous, they're happier with their money overall, regardless of how much money they have. So I'm completely in agreement with you about, the goal to be like that couple that you just referenced.
So what if couples have various or different levels of comfortability with generosity? Where would you start?
Yeah, it's funny. That's a great question. We were talking to a pastor the other day about our course, and he had this aha moment. He's like, wow, when we're talking about generosity, it never struck me that I'm talking to two people in a relationship. I'm talking to two people with potentially wildly different perspectives on how much they should give our church. Right. Like, so think about that. Like, probably where they're ending up is somewhere, either one of them won or they're somewhere in the middle. And we don't really talk about that. And I think I go back to that, the question we just talked about before, so I would say, have the communication, discuss like, this value and where it comes from, because what you'll start to find out is those stories of our past. all these questions you're asking tying together, like what they learned from their parents is a huge influence on what they think they should be doing. One came in and it's like, my parents always gave away 25% of our income. Like, imagine they're coming in thinking like, this is just the way you do it. And the other one's like, no, my parents barely gave because they thought we couldn't get by. Like, those two things are going to clash. So now talk about it, and start to align on what do they both care about, building the church and helping others. And then I say, take small steps and actions. Like, don't go just like say, hey, let's go run a marathon tomorrow. Like, a small step matters. And so, you know what, if you're both aligned on something, it's a great thing. It's for children or through the church. Like, agree on that, agree on a number, agree on what you'll do, and then do it and celebrate it. Like, don't beat each other up because, and yeah, more than likely one of you thinks we should be giving more and the other one's like, we should be prudent and hold back, and like, yeah, work on that. But you know what? Take the small wins, build from the positives, and find those places of alignment and lean into those, because I think that will create momentum, that will feel good for the relationship. And when we're having fun and when we're feeling good about it, like, we're more than likely going to keep growing in that area. And I think that's the way to approach it.
So it really comes down to have honest conversations, explore your beliefs about the decisions that you're making, and find some wins to celebrate together.
Yep. Take some small steps together. Better to take, for me, not that this is always the dichotomy that we face, but if I have a choice between a couple being on the same page and taking small steps, or the couple doing the quote unquote most financially sound things, but only one of them's on board, I'll take the first every single day of the week, because I believe, in the research we've been doing is showing that ultimately that team together, look at the couple you just named, they were aligned in that. They started someplace and it grew to something incredible. And I think that together we can do much more than just forcing our way into the quote unquote right things today, and not being on board. So you nailed it.
Okay. So I have 3 questions that are my favorite questions to ask my friends. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'll try. I'll try.
Okay. First question is, what does living a remarkable life look like for you?
Oh, wow. Can we go back to the love and money questions? So like, I'm like, I live in those all day long. Okay. Well, I think the question immediately makes me think of like, remarkable to who, right? And so I think the first thing is, I'm a big fan of keep it simple. And like, I go back to Matthew and, the commands of love God and love others. And so first, I think being remarkable, quote unquote, in the eyes of God, and just, well done, good and faithful servant. And so I think just, am I truly faithfully trying to serve God no matter what I'm doing? Not about being remarkable in the eyes of everyone, but just like, am I just doing everything I should be doing today? And then when I think of others, like, I just think like, in order of priority, my wife, my kids, those right around me, like, I just think if I could get to the end of life, and feel like God was pleased with what I did, but then like my wife to say like, he loved me and served me every day of his life. And for my kids to say, he loved us and served us every day. Like, and then people around me to just feel like, maybe I didn't do anything huge or magnificent in the eyes of the world, but that those people who I got to be in contact with felt like, he loved and served us. And then like the how, honestly, man, I say, Mandy, is like, yeah, what I struggle with and pray every day is like, God gave us the how, like the fruit of the Spirit, it's just so challenging to me, like love, joy, peace, and patience, and kindness, and goodness. And half the words I'm like, man, I don't do that really well. And so to be remarkable, I think, is to like be patient and loving and kind and good and gentle. And so we think like, we're going to do these amazing life-changing things. And like, what I struggle with to be remarkable is like, am I being kind enough or patient enough just today with my wife and kids and the people I interact with? And I can't get past that spot. So I guess that's what I'm working on to live a remarkable life. I'm not sure if that's a good answer, but that'll work.
It's beautiful. And I think the remarkable part really is the things that happen closest to us, right?
Yeah.
The things that are in our everyday lives and our family.
What's funny is we just had, who was it that said this on the Love and Money podcast? But I wish I could credit it to them. But they said people will remember from their childhood. What they'll remember is the things that happened consistently and the experiences that were surprising and so remarkable. So to your point, it's like the stuff like, oh, my dad always did this. Like we remember that. And then we remember the delightful surprises of like that time we went and did this. Right. And so that's what ends up being remarkable. Those things we did every day. And then the way we found joy in experiences with those closest to us.
That is good. And that's good to know as a parent, the things that stick with our kids.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about, like parenting and kids. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Second question. What is the best advice you never got?
I think my mind, not surprisingly, goes into this money world, because that's I'm spending my days doing. And I think something that wasn't explicitly sort of given to me was that if you live with less, you'll always experience more. And you just, that couple you just shared, it's like, I want their phone number. I want to learn from them because I'm still working in my own life to really live into that. And I feel like what we talked about with parenting and with kids, like teach your kids, like, look, live with what you've got, appreciate what you've got, live with less, and you'll always feel like you have more and like the freedom to do more. And so just that advice of like that couple, like someone said to me the other day, that right when the head of our credit union said all their kids, every one of their kids, they said when they got out of college and started their job, day one, they were with them when they did the benefits, and they said, this is how much you're going to put into your retirement. And when they were going through high school, they made them put certain amount of money, and they literally were teaching them how to make do while putting money aside to do things like giving and investing in their future, just like the couple you described. Like those people don't even need any help. Like they're on such an amazing path because they already adjusted their life around a little bit less than they needed to, and they're joyful in it, right? So they're not chasing like the rest of us. So that's the best advice that I feel like I wish I would have had that more clearly along the way.
Me too. I wish someone sat down with me when I was doing my benefits for my first job and did that.
Yeah, I mean, he said that, and I'm like, here I am building my way up, and his kids for like 20 years were already living. We're investing more than I did my first 20 years. I was like, wow, shoot, I missed out on that.
I know, right? All right. Okay, last question. What are you doing currently in your life to have more fun?
Oh, all right. Well, on a few fronts, my life, I feel like I'm having a lot of fun. Here's what I'll say first. My wife and I, this is going to sound like a pitch for a company, but like our date nights, we love movies and going out. Like the whole movie theater experience is crazy cool now. Like the whole recliner couch, you can grab a beverage, they can bring popcorn to your seat. Like it's luxurious at AMC. And so like I'm loving that date night. That's super fun. My kids, I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, and my daughter's dancing for the high school, and my son's playing like 15 different sports. And I love being the dorky dad at the dance meet and at my kid's soccer game. And that's super fun for me. I don't know, some other people may not like that, but I love it.
Oh, it's my favorite too.
Seriously.
And I'm probably pretty embarrassing.
I know.
Even at the kids, like thumbs up. You're doing great.
Oh man, I know I am. It's like my kids call it cringy. We're cringy. I'm cringy. I'm very, very cringy. And then personally, I was inspired by my son. I'm from Puerto Rico. We play a lot of sports. Soccer is not really one of them, but I was inspired by my son. So a bunch of dads, we formed a Sunday night soccer league, and we're horrible, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So those are some things I'm doing in my life to keep it fun.
That is awesome. Okay, so we're kind of in the same boat because my husband just joined a soccer team as well with all the other soccer dads.
Yes.
But is it true? Is the same thing happening on your team where like once a night someone's pulling a hammy or like there's some type of injury because they're going too hard?
So listen, I feel like you talked to my wife because, and I'm like, I'm going to check in with her and see if she did. And I'm like, I'm going to maybe say like, hey, you just stop listening to the podcast before that.
Yeah.
So we joined the league. The wives were making fun of us. And I have to tell you that it's an indoor league. And on the very first game, I pulled my hamstring.
Oh, are you
And,
serious?
yep. So I feel like you just personally were coming after me. But I was a little ambitious. I told my wife, "Hey, listen, that's my first injury since high school, so cut me some slack." But yes, basically the last 3 or 4 games, I have reported back success, not based on the score because we get killed, but by the number of injuries. So
Yes.
like the last 3 games, we've had no injuries, and I count that a massive success. Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely. Well, nicely done on that. That's impressive. And your hammy's all feeling better?
I took a couple of weeks off and I was
Good. You're back
was
at it.
right back at it. Yeah, and painfully
Fantastic.
aware of my age and lack of conditioning. And I'll tell you one last thing. My so we of course being the parents at the game, it's like we tell these kids it's horrible parenting. Like run faster, shoot it harder. Like we're giving all this advice from the sidelines, and a bunch of our sons came to the game last week, and it was payback time. Like as we're dying, and literally I'm looking at it and saying like I should probably be running over there. Like the kids were like, run harder. Try harder. It's like, okay, I get it.
That is the best. Yeah. I'm sure your cheering on the sidelines has changed.
Yes. Hey, really
Yeah.
good job. Good effort. You're doing
Yeah.
great. I appreciate how hard that is. Yes, that's changed dramatically for sure.
Uh, okay. One last question I have for you, Rafa. What is next for you and love and money? What's going on?
Yeah, so thanks for that. I would say for folks who are listening to a podcast, if you want to check out our page, loveandmoney.com/podcast. We've got a podcast where we're doing love and money, having a lot of these conversations all the time. Obviously,
So good, by the way.
listen to this one first, but then check out ours. Uh, and
Yeah.
and at the bottom of that, there's some great resources, so people can check out. Like we have a love and money relationship assessment. Take 5 minutes, it's free, and we'll give you some sense of like based on some of the science like we've talked about here, what are some things we can be working on. I mentioned some of the resources, so at loveandmoney.com, if you go to the resource page, you'll find some great stuff on as your audience knows, the Men, Women, and Money series on how to have understand and value each other around these conversations of money. But you'll also see some great things. We have a brand new app coming out called Tap to Save that'll hit the App Store here soon, and you can find more about it on that page. And then if you happen to be at a church, this is the kind of the latest and greatest at a church, and you get to play with like what courses and what things you do for couples. We've got a new course coming out at the beginning of the year called Money Better Together for couples to really learn how to be a team and how to make space for what matters most. Some of the stuff we're talking about here. And so we'll eventually put that info on the resource page. But if you're looking for more on that, you could actually text in the word Money Better to 31996. And then we're letting some early people try this out at their church, and we're footing the bill for them to give us feedback. So Money Better at 31996. So yeah, just check the resources. We're always coming out with something new to have this conversation.
Awesome. And Money Better, is that helping couples have more open conversations? Is it practical tools? What exactly is that?
Yeah, both. Exactly. And so
Okay.
what we did is we honed in on, so we live in this tension of love and money, obviously. And so we really honed in. We've been doing this for years, and we've been improving our courses. And so what we do is we have 2 objectives. We want you to be an unbeatable team because of everything we talked about on this podcast about the power of being a team, the way God created us. So how do we communicate? And there's some fun activities that, yes, fun and money, fun activities to play and learn about each other. And then we get into some of the really important stuff, like how do we make space and live within our means and get a plan for this very stuff we're talking about, for our spending and our saving, and so that we can give and save and live on the things that matter most. So that's our objective in the course. So yeah, if people want to check that out, it's going really well. The early results from the course participants are wonderful, and we're hitting it hard in 2019.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much. Thanks for all you are doing at brightpeak to revolutionize the conversation around love and money. We have benefited so much here at MOPS. And so thank you so much for all your hard work in that department.
Thank you. And we love the MOPS audience. You're literally our favorite. I feel like you've helped us learn so much. So thank you. And we'll continue to hope to be alongside and pray for everybody.
Thanks so much for listening today. One thing I know about living with tenacity and passion is that it takes other people around us to cheer us on. And if you are looking for some mom friends, then the best place to find them is at MOPS. And so go to our MOPS group search page and find a group in your area. You will not be disappointed. And now, go out and have more fun, and don't come back until you do.